little close.
What's all right with me?
All right.
Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So thank you all for joining us at the lovely inn at Barley Sheaf Farm. A couple of housekeeping items before we start. Everybody came in through the door at the front, but just want to let you know the men's room is back towards the front door. The ladies' room is right by the desk where everybody registered and checked in. Okay? You need to use the facilities at any time. Please feel free to do so. I think everybody knows coffee, tea, soda in the back, down the ramp, water at the tables, and light refreshments in the back my back right-hand corner here. Okay? If there's anything we can do to make you more comfortable, just let us know. Mary Beth, Joanne, and Todd will be circulating, or at least in the back. I got the look from Mary Beth that they would not be circulating. So, but they'll be around, okay? And I do want to thank Mary Beth, Joanne, and Todd for helping set this up, because without them, you all know that this would not have been possible. So, thank you. So just a brief history on how we got to this date. We wanted to do this in January, but it was too snowy. We wanted to do it in February, but it was too cold. March, we couldn't do it because Ed was in Florida, and we thought he should be here. April, tax time. May, a great date, but some have been stricken with the pollen bug. So everyone sees their cars are all yellow. Well, our good friend Mark here, a lot of you have been asking him, well, how are you doing? How are you feeling? He's got a bad case of laryngitis, but he wants me to emphasize to you it does not hurt. He is not in pain, and he's not suffering. He's going to work through the presentation here, and we'll do everything we can to help him get through. It's a little bit of a nightclub type of a voice that he has tonight, but we're going to power through it. And he's been in the business for 19 years. He's been with Legg Mason for 16 years, major institutional firm, and he lives up in Bethlehem with his wife and daughter. And I'll stop there and turn it over to Mark Kirby. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. This is going to be fun, but I'm going to fight through it, okay? So sorry for the sexy, smoky voice. You know, it's funny. I was standing up here talking to Loretta and Bill, and I was telling them that at the age of 42, which I am now, a lot of things have been changing. I got the laryngitis here since I've been 40, and I'm going to be 42 on May 17th. So for the last 3 years, this has been happening to me. And what's funny is, I don't know how many all celebrate Passover or Easter. That was a couple of weeks ago, yes. And we just had Christmas 5 months ago, if I have my math right. And here I am standing here with this voice before you tonight. We'll see how far I get through and how much you understand what I say. But it's pretty interesting. I was thinking, I'm sitting at the Easter table 4 weeks ago with my family. And I'm saying to myself, boy, have the conversations changed. 20 years ago, when I was 21, 22, the conversations are very different at the Easter table, Christmas table. The conversations back then, my parents were in their late 40s. My aunt and uncles were in their early 50s. Heck, I didn't have in-laws back then. I was like, yes. But those conversations back then, 20 years ago, were about them finishing their accumulation phase in life, paying the bills, getting me and my brothers through college, all of that stuff. Hoping not to lose their job, right? Think about that. Your late 40s, with your family, building your family, your career. Fast forward to Easter a couple weeks ago. I'm now 20 years older, 42. You know what the changes were taught? You know what the conversations were like in my house 4 weeks ago?
Medical.
Ah, very good. More along the lines of, well, a prostate removed, 2 hip replacements, mobility issues, and unfortunately my father-in-law has come down with Parkinson's disease. And these are conversations now at my dinner table, I'm sure maybe at some of yours, family or friends. Folks, this is what we're going to be going through. This is the toughest conversation. What I'm going to talk about tonight is about the challenges of aging and its financial implications, particularly on housing. Now, before I get into any more details with this voice, I want to start the presentation off on the right foot with someone who has a great clarity and education on talking to you all about aging and how it's going to play out in life.
Value this time in your life, kids.
Value this time.
Because this is the time in your life when you still have your choices. It goes by so fast.
It goes
When
by
you're a
so
teenager,
fast.
you think you
You're a
can do
teenager,
anything, and you do.
you think you can
Your
do
20s
anything,
are a
and you
blur.
do.
30s,
20
you raise your
20s
family,
are a
you make a
blur.
little money,
30s,
and you think to
raise your
yourself,
family,
what am I in my
money,
20s?
you think to yourself.
40s, you grow a little pot belly, you grow another
40s,
chin.
you grow a
The
little
music
pot
starts to
belly,
get
you
too
grow another
loud.
chin.
One of your old girlfriends
Music
from high
starts
school
to get
becomes a
too
grandma.
loud. One of your old girlfriends from
50s,
high
you have a
school becomes a
minor
grandma.
surgery, you call it a
50s,
procedure.
you have a minor
But it's a
surgery. You'll call it a procedure.
60s, you'll have a major surgery. The music is still loud, but
60s,
it
you'll have a
doesn't matter
major
because you can't hear
surgery.
it
The music
anyway.
is still loud, but it doesn't matter because you can't hear it
and the wife
anyway.
retired to Fort Lauderdale.
70s, you and the wife
Started
retired
eating
to
dinner
Fort
at 2 o'clock in
Lauderdale.
the afternoon, get lunch around
dinner at 2
10,
o'clock in
breakfast
the
the night before, spend most of your time wandering around malls looking for the ultimate soft yogurt and muttering, how come the kids don't call? How come the kids don't call? The 80s, you'll have a major stroke.
The
You
80s,
end
you'll
up
have a
babbling to
major
some
stroke.
Jamaican nurse your wife can't
End
stand,
up
but you call
babbling to some
mama.
Jamaican nurse your wife
Any
can't stand, but
questions?
you call mama.
Now, hopefully y'all don't look at me at 30 minutes from now the way she looked at Billy Crystal there, okay? But seriously, Billy's great. I thought that was a pretty funny intro to talk about what we're going to talk about tonight. I do disagree with one thing he said, if you picked up on it. When he was talking to those fourth graders, he said, hey kids, this is the greatest time of your life. This is when you have choices. He is the furthest from the truth on that. Because tonight's presentation is all about empowering you all to proactively make the right choices in life as you age. And I don't know if you all see that up on the screen there, but in the words of John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, he had this saying which a lot of us use: to hope for the best and prepare for the worst is a trite, but a good maxim. That's what Ed and team are trying to do for each and every one of you every single day as a fiduciary planner for you. Now, before I get started, I want to recognize our esteemed colleagues in this initiative, as I was talking to my friend Loretta up here about this. Because who is Legg Mason to be standing up here before you, discussing you about the challenges of aging and its financial implications on planning for housing? We just manage $720 billion in assets. We're an asset manager. But we decided to partner with our esteemed colleagues down in Baltimore, Maryland, where our headquarters are, Johns Hopkins Medical University, the Center of Innovative Care and Aging. Now, the reason why we chose Johns Hopkins, I'm sure many of you know that name and recognize that brand, we chose them for their practical insight, their pedigree, and their expertise, specifically in the areas of aging, gerontology, longevity, and housing. And the reason why we chose them for that is because we believe it's going to be very impactful on everyone's lifestyles and state of mind as you age and how you're going to deal with it. And what Johns Hopkins was instrumental in doing for us, and you have the study, I think, Mary Beth, I don't know if everyone got one or each couple got one, what's sitting before you is the study that Johns Hopkins collaborated with us for you. What we asked them to do was create content to initiate this conversation around aging for families to initiate with their loved ones on this ever important topic of the challenges of aging and its financial implications, particularly planning for housing. I'm doing good so far, right? You can understand me? I'm rolling. I didn't take a drink of water yet. Now, I just said about the challenges of aging. And just, amuse me for a second here. Would you all agree, when you think about the challenges of aging, that a majority of us, when we think about financial planning, we think about retirement? And when you focus just on retirement, what comes to mind? The bucket list years. Am I right? Now, all of us in this room, 50 of us, 60 of us, have a different variation of what our bucket list years may be, right? Some of us want to buy that second house. You want to downsize maybe, possibly. You want to buy that boat. You want to travel more. Go see the places you didn't get to see when you were collecting a W-2 or a 1099. You want to go maybe give back to charity or volunteer work, things that you didn't get to do when you were working, right? But the one thing we as Americans forget about is that as we got up to the bucket list years, we went through the accumulation phase of life. Remember what I said about 20 years ago? My conversation at the table was different. My parents were going through the accumulation phase. Now the bucket list year is about the decumulation phase of life. And there's a whole host of other options, scenarios with money and investing. But in particular, you know what we forget about? We forget about the what ifs, the unexpected. That trip, that fall, that accident, God forbid, that chronic issue, that acute care issue. How are we prepared for that? How are we talking to our significant others, our spouse, our family members, our kids, about how we want to prepare if, God forbid, a situation that was unexpected came about? And I think as Americans, we do a bad job of that. And that's what tonight's presentation is about, is focusing in on that and recognizing that those bucket list years, they could be very short, 5, 10 years, or for a lot of us, as we were talking about, could be as long as 25, 30, 35 years. Now, I know this personally. My uncle was a former CEO of a small regional bank down in Nashville, Tennessee. At 70 years old, he had to retire. Why did he retire? He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Now, think about this. At the age of 76, he passed away. 6 short years he lived in, right, in his bucket list years. First 3 years were not fun. The last 3 years were hellacious for my aunts and my cousins. But for all the money that he encompassed as a CEO, he couldn't buy back those extra bucket list years. You know, frailty and aging have no economic boundaries, folks. None. You have to set a plan in motion. And if you think about this, for a lot of us, we're going to be dealing with longevity in retirement bucket list years. As you can see up on the screen, anywhere between 20 to 30 years. And what comes with that for many of us are a lot of different obstacles that you have to plan for. And we at Legg Mason with John Hopkins decided to give you a better streamlined variation of that, to put it in perspective. We like to say that, hey, for those of us that are going to live another 25, 30, 35 years in retirement, we have to compartmentalize into 3 stages of life. The go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years, right? I feel like I'm in my no-go years right now, my voice. But you start with the go-go years. My parents are 69, they're retired. They got some money, they got their health, they're doing the things that they want to complete with their bucket list, right? My Aunt Bernadette, God bless her, passed away when she was the age of 89, but from the age of 50 to 75, she was very active. She worked in Secaucus, New Jersey, up in the Meadowlands by Giant Stadium. I know that most of you are Philadelphia fans here, but she worked up in that area, working for a 5 and 10. From 50 to 75, she was widowed at the age of 52. She was very active in her community, Meals on Wheels, etc. But when she got into around 78, 79, 80, we started noticing something changing. The slow-go years. This is a woman that was very active. And then just going to the supermarket for 2 hours became a big deal for her. And then you got the no-go years, where unfortunately you're dealing with mobility issues, possibly activities of daily living are starting to impede upon your physical attributes. These are the 3 areas you want just to visualize as you go through challenges of aging and recognize how you want to prepare for those 3 stages. There's a cost, but there's also a cost when it comes to planning for housing. Now, the next part we're going to talk about here, as you saw, was the profile of aging. And there's a variety of challenges with aging. And there's a lot of trends that I want to touch upon tonight, but for the sake of time, I'm only going to touch upon maybe 3 or 4 of them. But there are a variety of trends that are going to impact the decision-making process on housing in retirement. And you know what the number 1 is? Right up here on the board. How many of y'all know the baby boomer generation in here? Born from 1946, Barry Manilow, to 1964, Sarah Palin. And for you baseball guys, since baseball just started, Barry Bonds, 1964. That age demography represents 34 with a T trillion dollars in wealth. That age demography right now represents somewhere, I don't know if y'all can see it, but it's very interesting. The stat is there, 2010. The Congressional Budget Office put out in 2010 that the 65-plus community in the United States represented 11% of the population. Folks, we have 354 million Americans. By 2030, which is now 15 years from now, almost 22% of the population is going to be that baby boomer generation. That's going to have a profound effect on the market, on real estate, etc. So much that the Congressional Budget Office said that between 2010 and 2030, 77% of the demand for housing is coming from the 65-plus community. And on top of that, Loretta, my friend up here, which I apologize, I keep using you, but it's okay. You said that was okay. We're talking about aging and longevity. Now think about all the enhancements to therapeutics, medications, pharma. AIDS used to be a hellacious disease back in the early 90s. Remember Magic Johnson, the great basketball player, stood up at the LA Forum in 1991 and announced he had AIDS. He's still alive today. Now back then I agree he had money, but there's a plethora of people that are middle class today that unfortunately got that hellacious disease, and they're living because it became not a death sentence, but a chronic illness. We're gonna see that happen with variations of cancer over the next 15 to 20 years. Go from a death sentence to a chronic illness. That means you're gonna have to save differently because you're gonna live longer. And look at the stats up there with this trend. If you hit the age of 65, you're looking at living possibly another 19 years in retirement. If you hit the age of 85, you're living another 6 to 7. And my lady friends in the room, the ones who are the most pragmatic and the matriarchs of the household, if you hit the age of 85, you're looking at possibly living another 11 to 12 years. Look at that stat up there. It's frightening. Women are outliving men at an extraordinary pace. Guys, they're outliving us almost 2 to 1. They're living on average 5 to 6 more years than us. Women are twice as likely to be widowed. A very interesting stat. The Bureau of Labor put it out last year. Women representing the 65-plus community in the United States right now, that age group, 65 women, is right now 59% of our population in that age bracket, and it's going up. Women of 85, that age bracket in the United States, you know what they represent? Percentage? Over 71. It's growing. Women are going to be living longer. So with a longer duration of time, you have to think about how you're going to save differently. And this is why I say to practitioners like Ed and Mary Beth and Ed, you got to be working with your female clients more. Not just them, other advisors. And I stress to you all as couples, have more of a pragmatic conversation about how you want to live with control and dignity, and where, and what the costs are. This is why you have a financial planner. And women, you're going to be inheriting of that $34 trillion I said before, the baby boomers, over the next 30 years. That's a big number. I know it's small on the screen, but it's a big number. $28 trillion women are going to inherit over the next 30 years. Think about that. Think about that. Now, we're talking about a big number like that. You're talking about income, right? And I want to stay on that trend. This baby boomer generation, that 65-plus community, is the most affluent demography in the world, with over 34 trillion. With having that type of income comes a lot of income sources that 65-plus have. And that comes with a lot of choices, because when you have assets and you're working with a financial planner, you got choices. And that's what you want. Now let me just stop there for a second. How many of y'all, raise your hand, would like to age with control and dignity in your own home, whether it's your second home right now or your first home that you built, all your memories with your children and others? How many of y'all would want to age with control and dignity in their own house until their last days? Half the room. I usually get like 60-40, okay? You're not alone. You look at this stat up here, the 65-plus community, when John Hopkins interviewed them, 80% said they want to own their own home. But when they retire and they decide they want to make a move, 59% said they want to rent. Think about that. There's a reason for that. We're going to get into that in a second. What's pretty remarkable, though, and a little concerning in my eyes, is on the bottom here. You see that stat? For those 75 or older, 36% of retirement income is going to housing expenses. John Hopkins interviewed over 5,000 couples between the ages of 55 and 75 with a net worth somewhere around $750,000 2 years ago. And they wanted to know one thing. Your 55 to 65-year-olds who are still probably paying a mortgage, still collecting a W-2 or a 1099, how much were you putting of your personal income into your home? And their answer, remember, this is 55 to 64-year-olds, 30%. Sound right? You're working, you got a mortgage, 30% of your income's going to your house. The 75-year-olds, it's higher. 36% of their retirement income is going into their house. Now, I don't know about y'all. I'm going to be 42. When I'm 75, I will be damn sure not to be putting 36% of my retirement income into my house, because I'm going to be working with a financial planner. That's why you got to be working with Ed and team. And I think when you look at it, that is going to have a profound effect, that stat, on those folks' quality of life as they age. More so on their family as well. And it's going to have a profound effect on how their financial future is going to be. They're either going to win or they're going to lose. These are things you got to look at. One last trend, and I said this before, about with owning your home, and most people want to own, as we saw from everyone, half the room saying that they want to own their own home, and then eventually 59% I said want to rent at some point. Why do you want to rent? Well, because lifestyles change. Health issues change, right? And one major trend we're seeing right here, as you can see, people move for a variety of reasons as they get older and their needs change. Think about the winters the last 3 years here. Think about the poor schmucks up in Boston. They had like 85 feet of snow this year. I mean, it gets to be an albatross owning a home as you get older to say, I give up. I don't want to deal with the gutters. I don't want to deal with the shoveling. I don't want to deal with the yard work or the leaves. Right? So there's a variety of reasons why, from a weather standpoint, a maintenance standpoint, if you have choices and you have a plan, you can make a move. You can decide on where you want to go. We also live in a day and age where you might want to see trends where more retirees decide, hey, I want to move more closer to my kids and to my grandkids. Yeah, we have Skype today, and we got the iPad and the iPhone, and we can do all that. But a lot of times people want to see it now, more so than ever before, especially if you've got the resources to do it. Get rid of the house, downsize to a ranch, and move closer to the grandkids. And the other trend that we see that happens in life is just physical limitations. I mean, Loretta and I were talking about this before. Heck, when I hit my 30s, I started going bald. I hit my 40s, I'm losing my voice. By my 50s, I'm going to have a mobility issue. Who knows? But mobility issues are a natural proliferation with aging. Yes? It happens. It happens. What's very interesting is there's a stat up here that John Hopkins pulled up. I don't know if you all can see this, but as many as 41% of Medicare enrollees, 41% of Medicare enrollees at the age of 65 cited some form of a physical slowdown limitation. Right? It happens. But when those things happen, if you have a plan in place, and you have a financial plan in place, and you're working with somebody, you have choices on how you want to live as you age. Whether there's a mobility issue or no mobility issue, you got choices. You want to look at those choices and where they start. Now, I just want to get into this part of the presentation because I think it's the most important. Financial planning. And you've heard me say this here in the last 2 minutes. I think we all just went through showing the stat about the 75-year-olds, that housing is a significant portion of household income, particularly for people over the age of 75, right? And if housing is that expensive in your decumulation phase of life, shouldn't you be starting to put together or incorporating it in the conversation next to Social Security, next to your conversations with Ed around insurance, whether it be regular insurance or long-term care? Shouldn't housing be in your financial plan when talking about healthcare and the costs? I think so. And I think if you have a financial plan in place and make housing a part of that conversation, it is an epicenter, it's an investment policy statement to draw on with Ed and team when and if you have to make the decision on to retrofit or make universal your home to accommodate you. Or if you want to downsize. Or if, God forbid, you have to look at an assisted living or a continued care retirement community. To have a financial plan in place, to have housing as a part of the cost of the situation, I think is profound. Because it's a nucleus, an impetus to go to when this conversation comes up, because it's a contract between you and your financial planner, you and Ed, around the costs and the options that you have as you age and where you want to live with control and dignity. Draw on that. The other part I think of with a financial plan, where it's extremely beneficial, because it's happened to me, and I'll tell you the story, is family. Because if you don't have a financial plan in place, and you don't know what to draw on when an event happens, Americans are great at reacting, not being active, right? Perfect example is causing resentment, causing frustration amongst family members. You're looking at a guy right here that went through it. I'm the oldest of 3 boys. My mother is the oldest of her and her 2 sisters. Her 2 sisters, one lives in North Carolina now, the other one lives in Connecticut. This is 1996. I'm coming out of college. First year out of college or whatever. My grandmother comes down with Alzheimer's. Now, here's the thing. My mother, 25 years earlier, got the opportunity, my dad and my 2 brothers, to live next door to my grandparents. So I get to grow up next to a World War II fighter pilot and my grandparents for 25 years. That's my voice. My mom got the benefit, being a mom, she was a secretary, she got I get a little choked up. She got the benefit to live next door to them, right? And you think about it, when me and my brothers went to hockey camp or football or band, who was living next door to pick up for my mom and my dad, to pick us up when there was traffic and the boys from practice or from school? Grandma and Pop, right? Mom and Dad wanted to go to Poconos because we lived in northern New Jersey, just so you know that. They wanted to go to Poconos for a romantic weekend. Who watched the 3 boys? Grandpa. Fast forward to 96, my grandmother comes down with Alzheimer's. My grandfather worked for Thomas's English Muffins for 35 years after the war, right? He had some money, he had some Unilever stock. He didn't have an Ed, he didn't have a planner. He didn't have long-term care. But guess what? When my grandmother came down with that, you know what his solution was? We're gonna take care of her with control and dignity in the house I built. Now, I wish I knew what I know now and what you all have in front of you, that I could have had more of a pragmatic approach to that and interceded with that thought process. Because at the time it seemed right? But now I look at my mom back in 96, she became the alpha kid. She didn't sign up for it, right? She had to hire and fire, network of care to come in and take care of my grandmother, my grandfather. It was a burden, right? It put a lot of stress on her, put a lot of stress on my dad, my brothers and I. Guess where the resentment was? My 2 aunts, the one in Connecticut, the one in the Carolinas. It wasn't their fault, just that's how it played out. So you gotta think about this, having a financial plan. If you had a plan in place, take my situation, I think our lives would have been a lot easier. We would have had a game plan on how to deal with the what ifs. We didn't, that's the best we did. Here we are now, over almost 20 years later, you all have a game plan. John Hopkins is providing a game plan, and we're going to get into that. And I think the last thing you can think about with a financial plan is just having control and dignity on choices. Because let's face it, you all raised your hands, half of you, saying that you want to have control and dignity and live to the end in your house. We all do, right? For the comforts of it, because little Sally had her first tooth she lost there, little Johnny threw a baseball through the window. It's all the memories. But you have to say to yourself, what if you have to make that decision to move into an assisted living facility? Wouldn't you like to have a plan in place on which assisted living facilities you want to go into, instead of just going into it, God forbid? That's what we do. Kind of like my grandparents. No plan. Same thing with, God forbid, a skilled nursing home. Wouldn't you rather have a financial plan in place where you sit down with Ed and investigate some of these places before the event ever happens? So you have a protocol, a systematized approach on what the costs are, what it means to the family, and is the family involved with the decision-making process to some extent? Yes? That makes sense? That's why you want to have a financial plan. I know it's a tough conversation. Trust me, I've lived it. It's a very tough conversation to have with family members because it's emotional talking about leaving the house. But you got to think about the what ifs. And here's something that, I'm just putting up here, assessing your housing needs. You think about how you want to live your future days moving forward financially, your well-being, thinking about arrangements on where you like to live and how you want to live. You got choices now. Think about it. Plan it out. Start talking to your significant other, your partner, your husband, your wife, your kids, the next generation who's going to inherit your wealth. Talk about where are your primary considerations where you would like to reside over time. What are your secondary considerations? Are your family members, your kids, look at my situation, are they involved? They know what's going on. Don't hide it. Have that conversation. Let Ed be the epicenter for that. We gave a piece, I said to you about having content that I didn't have and my family didn't have back in '96. Y'all have content. If you open up your study page to the tab that says financial planning in gold, it's the gold tab. Looks like this. It's called Assessing Your Housing Needs. This is probably Ed, Mary Beth, myself sat down over lunch twice talking about this. This is the best content to dovetail into a financial plan discussion behind Social Security, behind long-term care insurance. This is what you want to talk to Ed about. If there's one thing to do this weekend, I know it's Mother's Day coming up. You're probably not going to do it because you're a bit family. Over the next 2 weeks, sit down with your husband, your wife, your significant other, read through this. And then set up an appointment to go see Ed. Because, folks, this is the best content. And I'm not saying it because it's not like Mason's, it's John Hopkins. When you read this and go through it, trust me, you're going to tell Ed to call me and say, hey, that Mark Kirby, he was right. Yeah. This makes us think a little bit differently, a little bit more pragmatically on how we want to have control and dignity through our most important years during the decumulation phase of life. It talks about the level of care you want to think about, your neighborhood, safety. It talks about social support, caregiving. Look at it. It's some of the best content for you to start thinking about more pragmatically as you go through retirement. Now let's get into the interesting housing options. Good stuff. How am I doing on time, all right? Now, you'll see up here, there's a variety of options. From aging in place, which we've talked a pretty decent amount of here when we talk about challenges and talking about the trends and talking about financial planning. But aging in place, 55 plus independent living, assisted living, continued care retirement communities, which I like to call the nirvana, and we'll get into that in a second, skilled nursing, and subacute care. Now this is a housing option service comparison overview that you can see on the left-hand side, life stages, active, healthy, social, help with daily living, medical care, daily living and medical care. And you can see 55 plus communities only really encompass 3 of those. Assisted living encompasses really only 4 of those. We're going to go through these. Skilled nursing encompasses 4 of these. But you notice continuing care encompasses all of them. That's the most comprehensive. Think Pine Run or Hightower in this area. That's a continuing care retirement community, and we'll get into that in a second. Now, costs. Ooh, that was loud. Costs. Now we didn't, I'm getting excited. We didn't put up here aging in place because that's variable, right? That's very different for everybody. But these numbers that y'all see up here are national averages, okay? They're not local, they're national averages. 55 plus independent living right now, across the country. I think this is going to change going forward based on the trends I said before, but that $3,000 is a monthly rental at a 55 plus community. $3,000 a month nationally. I think most folks that are going to look at 55 plus because they're going to see their house as an albatross. They want to be in a community that's still very social because they're still very active. I think most people are going to buy those facilities, okay? But we'll see. We'll see in time, but you have to take into account, if you do buy 55 plus, you got to take into account local real estate taxes, and HOA fees. Assisted living, again, this is a monthly charge, average in the country about $3,500 a month. Continued care communities, as I said before, this is the nirvana. On average nationally, a month, $5,800, but you're putting a huge premium equity pay down into these facilities, and we'll get into that in a second. And then skilled nursing, on average across the country, monthly is about $6,900 a month on average. And all this content is in your study. But that's all great to give you national averages, as I said. What you want to know is local. Hey, Mark, tell me what it's like in Horsham. Tell me what the average cost is of 55 plus or CCRCs in Doylestown, in Jenkintown. Okay? You see the map of the United States right there? If you all have a pen, this is the only thing I want you to write down tonight. If you got an iPhone, you got an iPad at home or a computer, do this. Go to this website on Google. Just type in Google, in the search box, 2014 or 2015, whatever one you want to do. Cost of care survey, Genworth. Got me? 2014 or 2015, cost of care survey, Genworth. The first hyperlink that pops up, click on it.
What's the last word?
Genworth. Genworth. My voice is coming back. This is great. Must be the steroids I took. That website, you could go in by zip code on where you reside. So if you live in Doylestown, or you live in Jenkintown, or you live in Horsham, or you live where I live, Bethlehem, put in the zip code, you will be able to see and draw down at your time what's the average cost locally in a 55 plus in that area code. Continued care retirement community, assisted living, skilled nursing. Make sense? It makes sense too, because I've seen situations with some other financial planners I work with where they got clients that tell me, hey Mark, me and Betsy Sue are living up in Allentown, PA, and our girls are growing up out of the house, and my sister lives down in Richmond, Virginia. We want to get out of the house because all the winter vortexes and the hurricanes here in the Northeast in Allentown. Should we be looking at a 55 plus in Richmond? You could do this on this survey. Compare and contrast Allentown, PA, relative to Richmond, Virginia. 55 plus communities, continuing care, it makes sense. Think about that, okay? Or you can talk to Ed about that. Now, just gonna go through some of these options right now. Aging in place. This is the one that y'all, 50% of you said you want to do. Aging in place obviously assumes that you want to reside in your home until your last days. And with aging in place, you got to think about the benefits and the considerations and the costs. There's a cost, right? Both financially as well as emotionally. And I think when you look at the costs, there's two things I think you want to look at. One, do I want to live in the house that I built my memories on? As I said before, little Johnny threw his first baseball through a window. We've got, that corner of the paint on the stairway brushed away because there was an accident. If you want to live in your house, that's one thing. Or maybe you want to downsize to a ranch at some point. Either one, there's a cost. You got to think about that. Because you got to think about, hey, if I'm going to live in my house and not look at ever a 55 plus or assisted living or continuing care, what if something happens to me or my significant other or my loved one? What if I have to retrofit the house to meet me as I age? Universal design. What is the cost? there's a piece, if you would be so kind, in the study to open up. The tab says at the back, it's blue, a blue tab, Tools and Resources. And if you would be so kind to go to that real quick, you'll see a piece on there that says Home Safety Assessment Checklist. It's really thick. Have you all seen that yet? Home safety, it's in the blue tab. A couple pages in, you'll see Home Safety Assessment Checklist. It's about 4 pages long. John Hopkins drafted it. And here's something for you. If you want to age in place, here's my 2 cents. There's going to be a cost at some point. Mobility, some point. If you're on Social Security and Medicare right now, and you're over the age of 65, go to your family practitioner. Medicare will pick this up. Go to your family practitioner, get a prescription. Medicare pays for this. To have them recognize to you or pick your own out, an occupational therapist to come out to your property and do a full home safety assessment. Now, don't wait. Take this piece and hand it to them. Take a piece for yourself. Maybe Ed will be so kind to come in and walk with you around the house and the occupational therapist and start going room by room using this content on what might need to be done down the road. Hopefully nothing. But I know this, a lot of us are going to deal with mobility issues. My mom did this down in Cape May, New Jersey, and she's happy as a peach now. Her bucket list was to move down to Cape May, New Jersey, buy her dream house by the water, eat her granola and strawberries, looking at the Delaware Bay, seeing dolphins jump out. My dad got her that dream of her bucket list, but she wanted to buy a house in the Delaware Bay looking at Delaware, and she wanted an upstairs grand bedroom with grand walkout panache, deck and everything. But you know what her financial advisor told her? Hey, Darlene, you might want to think about things a little differently. What if, God forbid, you were secluded, you were akin to a wheelchair? Have you thought about that? What that cost might be to get up to the bedroom? We might have to put an elevator in, or a chair lift, and then walls have to come down. Additions have to be put on. Do you have the money, the plan around that cash flow? Have we talked about that? Have you thought about that? Interesting. So he recommended to them to have an open floor plan, right? Told her, hey, Darlene, have your bedroom on the first floor. Open up your doorways from 27 inches to 36 and put the trim and trail rail around it and all that. No one will tell. Do it now as you're building the house. Don't wait. That was 2007. Here we are 8 years later. Remember I told you 30 minutes ago, sitting at the table with the hip replacements now, right? My mom had both replaced in the last 3 years. She's thanking her lucky stars that her bedroom wasn't on the second floor. Now she was lucky because her advisor advised it before the event ever happened. That's what you could use with this content. Use this home safety assessment to go around, assess the house now, sit down with Ed, do you have the cash flow to meet those needs? God forbid if you need to. Think about that, that's a cost. The other thing you gotta consider too with living at home is looking at the considerations around family as well, because you saw the situation what I had with my grandparents. If you're gonna have care come in, that could be a burden onto a family member. Have a plan in place to look at those costs, to bring nursing care in, skilled care in. Take into consideration if you're gonna be living at home or downsizing to a ranch, the geography, the neighborhood. Are you comfortable with the changes going on in your neighborhood? These are things to be pragmatic about, right? Know the social side. That's another big thing. Social. Living home alone, God forbid you have your significant other pass, you're home alone. That's something to talk about. You see more people passing away because of the non-social interaction than the physical. You gotta think about that, okay? So these are just some considerations, transportation, socialization, etc. I didn't want to forget this. Bucks County Office of the Aging, you could check into that. There's also a company that, I don't know if I mentioned it to Ed in past conversations, but I work with a company called Care Patrol. where they, along with Bucks County Office of the Aging, they have folks that could come out and walk your family around to look at not just your house, right? I said that with the occupational therapist. But if you're looking at 55 plus communities, assisted living facilities, skilled nursing, they could help out with that as well. Any questions on that with the occupational therapist? Was that clear? Independent living. Obviously, these are planned communities for very active adults. These are folks, like I said before, with the trends. I'm done with the house. It's an albatross. I want to be with people my age. I want the social aspect. I'm healthy. I want a hassle-free lifestyle. And with these facilities, like I said, on average, they're about $3,000 a month. You don't have 24-hour care or assisted or skilled nursing whatsoever. You can, as a couple, I mean, look at these considerations. If you have long-term care, could have help brought in, that's okay. These facilities are great for family members because the grandkids can come over and stay over as much as they want with grandma and grandpa or whoever. And you look at the lifestyle considerations, a lot of these facilities today, 55 plus, the developers were pragmatists thinking ahead. They've built these arenas, or these facilities if you want to call them, in areas where they're very populated. There's a lot of brick and mortar and malls, you know, consumer discretionary stores in the area, doctor's offices, physical therapists, you name it. They built these in areas where you still have a lot of activity. This is something to consider if you say to yourself, hey, I'm done with the house. This might be an alternative. Continued care retirement communities. Now these are the ones that I said before, give you all the lifestyle infrastructure, healthcare, everything. Well, things you have to consider with a continuing care retirement community, excuse me. Again, think Pine Run, think Hightower here in this area. These are communities where you have to walk in just like a 55 plus. You have to be mentally and physically sound, so you're walking into a 55 plus, but it's a campus. You have all the amenities of assisted living 24/7, as well as skilled nursing if you, your spouse, your significant other, your partner need that attention. You pay for it, and you can see some of the stats up there. But these facilities are a campus. They're grand homes, they're townhomes, they're apartments, they're condos. You move in, and off to the races. However, there's a big premium buy-in, and there's a consideration you can see up there. These prices range to move in entrance fee of $80,000 to $750,000 nationally. That changes all over the place. That's why you want to go to that Genworth website, cost of care. If this is something that you're considering, a significant other is considering, go there and look at these costs because they vary. But that's what the entrance fee is. That's a big premium, you know, put down. Your monthly services are between $900 and $5,400. As I said before, the average is $5,800. Where you see most people moving into these facilities are usually over the age of 62, where they don't have children and they don't want to be a burden on their family. But they want all the amenities that they always had at home with the extra assistance from the healthcare side. Now, if you have long-term care, you might not need the assisted living or the skilled nursing. You could actually have, if you're living in a condo or living in a grand home on a CCRC platform, you could have assistance brought in. But then again, you know, the assisted living there is there, and so is the skilled nursing. Your fees go up if you use them. You got to remember that. In regard to these facilities as well, since you're putting so much down up front, this is where you want to talk to Ed about getting involved in a state attorney, mostly an elderly care attorney, because you're going to be dealing with major contracts with these facilities. Because the pay-in is huge, as you know, as you can see from those stats, but there's a clawback with a lot of these facilities, to the point where you might get 50, 60, 70, 80% of what your down payment was back to your estate at some point. Something to look into. This is something else that you could write down and look into when you get a second. There's a great write-up, you could Google this, by a law firm in New York. The date was December 5th, 2012. The name of the law firm is McDermott, Will & Emery. and they wrote an article about CCRC entrance fees and monthly fees, a primer on the tax considerations to them. So it's McDermott, Will, and Emery, December 2012, CCRC primer, tax considerations on entrance fees and monthly fees. Something to take a look at, something to talk to Ed about if you're considering one of these. But you definitely want to get involved in an elderly care attorney with the contracts. McDermott, McDermott, Will, Will, and Emery, EM as in Mary, ERY. You could Google that. The date again is December 5th, 2012. Take a look at that. Those are with CCRCs. Now the last two, not the most fun housing options to consider, nor do you really want to enter them or have a loved one go in them, but they're worth it. You have to talk about and know what they're about. Assisted living facilities. These facilities are usually apartments, 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom. You rent. You can see the average cost is about $3,500 a month nationally. The reason why yourself, a spouse, a loved one would have to consider looking at in assisted living is because one of those 6 activities of daily living are starting to be an impediment on your daily life. What are those activities of daily living? Eating, bathing, dressing, toiletry, walking, and condensing. If one of those 6 or 2 of those 6 start to occur, this is where families start to have to consider, do we have to put a loved one into assisted living? But again, you want to investigate these places, right? These are not 24-hour skilled nursing, right? They have 24-hour supervisory and social enhancement, but they don't have the skilled nursing behind it. Medicare doesn't pick up. Medicaid, very little. Most states have some type of requirements that you'd have to go to and look into to see if Medicare picks up in any capacity. That website you'd look at is www.assistedliving.org. They have on that website a lot talking about the variations of Medicare and Medicaid and what does pick up assisted living. Most of the time it doesn't. Long-term care, good long-term care, picks up usually when 2 of those ADLs are in place. What to consider with assisted living too, with families, obviously you know that the activities of social aspects are being carried out for them. I think also too on the healthcare side, as I mentioned before, with Alzheimer's or dementia in my family, that is just becoming more and more of a hellacious disease. With assisted living, they have memory care units, a lot of them, that you have to look into. But there's a waiting list. How do you get that information? How do you ask about that? Again, go into the workbook I gave you. Go to the blue tab in Tools and Resources. John Hopkins drafted a full itinerary worksheet on you as a consumer concerned about your loved one, your partner, your spouse, your parents, what to ask the finance directors of these facilities. Take them to the mat. Find out. And memory care units, you want to find out, do they have them or do they not have them? But this is where I said you have a financial plan. This is what you sit down with Ed about and talk about. You have something to walk in and sit down with a finance director of these facilities and ask the pertinent questions, 1 through 40. Who drafted these questions? John Hopkins. They know what to ask. That's why we're giving you this information. Lastly, you look at skilled nursing facilities. These facilities are your typical 24-hour skilled nursing facilities and protection for your loved ones. These facilities, you have to take in consideration, as I said before, this is the last option anyone wants to put a significant other or partner into. But if you have to go down this road and you have to consider it, again, wouldn't you like to be prepared and investigate these places and not just throw mom into one. That's the most convenient for you and the most cost effective, because they're not always the best. Again, Johns Hopkins drafted in that tab a whole worksheet. If you want to go and make an appointment at a skilled nursing facility that you're looking into, because maybe mom or dad or maybe your significant other is, you're considering with the doctor, this might be the way to go in a year, go and investigate the places. You got a worksheet on what to ask these finance directors at these skilled nursing facilities. We provided it through Johns Hopkins. Some things to think about with these skilled nursing, some considerations. Patients that are admitted to skilled nursing, excuse me, you have physicians dedicated to every patient. That's number one. Number two, these are true medical facilities that are running timely medications and meals all the time for the patients. You have a variety of healthcare professionals, from doctors to nurses to dietitists to physical therapists, available on call all the time. The only unfortunate thing is this is where most folks end their last days, skilled nursing. This is till the end of days. Wrapping up with looking at costs here, I said earlier, and you can see the stat up there, 2011, that the average monthly cost in skilled nursing nationally was $6,900. The way long-term care works is that you pay into a daily benefit, and you can see at the top of the screen there in 2011, the average monthly cost of a semi-private room or private room was between $214 to $239. Medicare does pick up the first 20 days, supplemental 80 after, so you're looking at 100. But they're not going to pick up bathing, clothing, dressing, or eating. Medicaid picks up everything. So you want to look at, obviously, too, your long-term care providers when considering this. Also consider, as I said, with the assisted living, with Alzheimer's and dementia, what facilities offer this assistance. They have memory care units. You got to ask these questions because there's major waiting lists with a lot of these facilities. Subacute rehabilitation, I'm going to be really quick. Again, this gets back to having options and costs and having a plan on where and how you want to live with control and independence and dignity. Subacute care, think of a 16-year-old that just broke their leg, compounded fracture. Think of a 37-year-old that just had a skiing accident. Think of a 55-year-old that just had open heart surgery. A lot of times after you come out of the hospital, I don't know if any of you have gone through subacute care. I had a friend do this. You come out of the hospital, and subacute care is all about getting you back physically. So you can't go home yet. So where do they put you for rehabilitation? Usually in a skilled nursing facility. And a lot of these skilled nursing facilities don't have a wing just for those folks. You get thrown in with the local population. A lot of people don't want to deal with that because it brings you down. It's a little demoralizing. Think about that. If you have a plan, and you have time on your side, and you have choices, be pragmatic. Know where and how you want to live with independence, control, and dignity. These are things all to consider. In the study, there's a tab entitled in purple. You gotta love the color coordination. The purple tab goes into details on a couple of case studies that we see a lot of families in the United States on average going through. Your husband, your wife, your spouse, your significant other, even sitting down talking to your kids, look at it. It might remind you of a situation you have in your own family. It might be a reminder of a friend that you love and that you want to help out. Introduce them to this, because a lot of folks, I know I'm very visual. I'm not the best with auditory education. I like to see things. People want to read and see stuff in pictures. I think having case studies on this topic is imperative. Tools and resources. That's the tab that I've talked a couple times throughout the presentation on. You can see some of the resources, the home safety assessment. There's a great piece on aging in place resources in there as well. I like this piece because it gives a lot of neat little websites about things like, what's the one that they have on there? It's called Soul Protection. Soul Protection, S-O-L-E. Think of shoes. God forbid you have a loved one that's coming out with dementia, right? You want to put a low jack on them without them knowing? Give them these Soul shoes for Christmas. Don't let them know that there's a low jack in there that's tied to your iPad. You can track it all the time. It's incredible. It's innovative. There's also, I think it's called Soul Pad. There's another very innovative piece that's on this site, on this page, talking about a company called E-Pill, E-P-I-L. John Hopkins found out that last year in 2014, 45% of the enrollees into skilled nursing facilities, the last place we just talked about, 45% of patients that walked into skilled nursing were on average around 71 years old, and they were taking 12 pills a day. And the reason they went in is because they've got to take the pills. Things changed. E-Pill is great technology that is universal caps that go in any bottle cap for your loved ones or even yourself. That's a timer that is tied to your iPad, your iPhone, smartphone, you name it. There's a bell attached to it if you don't have an iPad or an iPhone. These are the little things about technology, how they're being enhanced, because technology realizes, Apple, Microsoft, you name it, we're living longer. You gotta start to enhance the way we wanna live with comfort, control, and independence. I went through the tools and resources, we hit on that. Glossy terms and references, you're gonna go through, hopefully I didn't, with the way my voice is, hopefully I did not confuse you with any verbiage. You can confuse yourself by reading this part. And I think just closing up, you know, the steps to take right now. What I wanted you to walk out of here tonight was hopefully with one thing. If you, oh my God, my throat. If you walked away with one thing, great. You walk away with two, I'm ecstatic. What you want to walk away with most often is what I have up here. Discuss retirement from this conversation a little bit differently. We're all going to be going through the decumulation phase of life. Start to think about what your wishes are, what your desires are. How do you want to live as you age? Where do you want to live? You have choices right now. Take advantage of those choices. Talk to your significant other. Talk to your wife. Talk to your husband. Talk to your partner. Hell, talk to your kids, because they're going to be inheriting. You know, they could be in a situation too, like I was in, okay, with my grandparents. You don't want them to be in those situations. You got content right now to engage this conversation. And more importantly, you have this content to sit down with Ed and his team to discuss this more pragmatically, with purpose. So on that, I'm going to close with, hopefully this works.
Thanks. Been out here all day. Survived out here all day.
Can you all hear this?
Excuse me. I was waiting for that space. Excuse me. I was waiting for that younger and faster.
Lady, we're younger and faster.
Yeah.